Hello everyone, welcome to this meeting in July for the Johnsonville Community Association and for North Wellington. We're here in this lovely facility of the Johnsonville Collective Community Hub here on Johnsonville Road, number 33 Johnsonville Road. They kindly let us have this great facility for community events, and this is one of those. I'm Tony Randall. I'm a member of the Johnsonville Community Association who's hosting this, and welcome people here and also on YouTube to join us about our meeting with a couple of interesting topics tonight. First of all, the house order things. So there's toilets at the back. If something happens, exits to the left, and please exit orderly. Tracy here will give further instructions.
Yes, I'm a fire warden.
Yes, yes, the fire warden, etc.
Follow me.
Also, the format is we've got two groups of speakers today. First of all, we've got Eddie from Let's Get Wellington Moving. He's going to speak to us about the Golden Mile in particular, but also give us a heads up on where we're at with some of the program stuff about fixing our transport. Later on, we're going to have Wellington Water, and they're going to talk about some changes, some hopefully improvements, I'm sure there are improvements, to the wastewater system that comes right up to Johnsonville and right up to Newlands. But it's the area to the north that goes out towards Porirua. That means that people from Glenside and Churton Park will be of interest to them as well. With that, so one last thing, people on YouTube, so we're going to have Q&A, and we're going to presentation, and you can then ask you questions, hopefully difficult ones. But anyway, people on YouTube are welcome to also post questions on YouTube chat, and we'll have them put to the speaker on your behalf. So that's the way it should work. So that's enough from me. Eddie, there's what's happening with things on Let's Get Wellington Moving.
Thanks, Tony. Kia ora koutou, Eddie Anand. I am in the Let's Get Wellington Moving team. Just a little bit of background. I'm part of a team called Short-Term Program, which is part of Let's Get Wellington Moving. And some projects within our team are Golden Mile Project, Tonki Health Road, Common Drive, as well as some Central City safety improvements from walking in. Today I'm going to talk about Golden Mile, but also at the end of that presentation, I'll give you a bit of an update on where the rest of the program is at. This was covered in our earlier stakeholder briefing in June, so I'll probably cover that same in terms of where things are at and what's coming next in terms of engagement. But the main topic today is the Golden Mile business case, where we are at, and what's the next steps in terms of where we're heading to. Apologies if some of you have already seen these slides, so I'll go as slow as I can, but yeah, absolutely happy to take questions at the end.
Tony, can you come and sit down here so we can do the presentation?
I will do a bit of a recap. The business case has been going on since November 2019. In the business case world, things take quite a long time. We have done quite a bit of community engagement today. I've done a lot of technical work on a lot of options and done community engagement last year. Last month we announced where we have landed with the preferred option for the Golden Mile, and I'll just talk about that through my presentation. Just a bit of a recap in terms of our Golden Mile vision. So this is in alignment with the wider program vision, which is to connect people across the central city with a reliable transport system that is in balance with an attractive pedestrian environment. So that's how we started our business case, which making sure we have a clear vision, and that vision is part of the wider program vision where we want to be. As I said, we started the business case back in November 2019. And part of that, the first thing we did was confirmed our investment objectives. We went out to community through Social Pinpoint, a platform to ask people what are the issues they face in Golden Mile and what are the changes they would like to see. So that then fed into problem statements in terms of the problems we're trying to address, the opportunities there on the Golden Mile, but also, and that led to our investment objectives, which is around The first one is on bus travel, and that is to make the buses more efficient and more reliable. The second one is the convenience and comfort, and that is around public transport, the bus users, the people who are waiting to board a bus or waiting to come off the bus. So these are people waiting at the bus stops to making sure the space is more convenient and it's more comfortable for them. Number 3 is around people's safety. So people who are using the Golden Mile need to make sure that they are in a safe environment. There needs to be more pedestrian space, and I think that is very closely linked to placemaking and vibrancy. There is around 40 to 70,000 pedestrians a day on Golden Mile, and it's quite sort of popular place for people to not only shop, to visit, but also it's a key commuter route. It's one of the key public transport corridors which serves the whole city. So pretty much every bus who services the suburbs goes through that Golden Mile. So we want to make sure that the people who visit the Golden Mile not only visit from a commuter perspective, but it's also a great place for people to sit down and enjoy the space where they are. So that's one of the key criteria for us to make sure the Golden Mile is an attractive space as well. If you recall, last June, between June and August, around for 6 weeks, we did public engagement on 3 options. The option 1 was streamline, which makes some tweaks to the existing corridor, closes some of the side streets, reduces the number of total bus stops to 6 pairs from 8. It also makes some changes in terms of lamps and key around sort of left in, left out turns. So there was just a minor tinkering to improve the way we can provide more for public transport and for people. Then we did a next option was prioritize, which basically removes all the private motor vehicles from the Golden Mile and reallocates the space to buses. And then we have a third option, which is transform, which still reduces the access for private motor vehicles, but reallocates more space to people and for placemaking. On the other side, you will see there's some feedback which came through from public and stakeholder engagement. The top bit is the positive feedback, which elements people liked about these options. And the bottom one is the feedback where they want us to do more in certain areas or provide more information, or they actually didn't like it. So positive feedback is around more space. People really loved it, that there was more space provided. There was priority given to buses, knowing that this is the key public transport corridor to the city. Removal of general traffic, we had a mixed reaction, but a lot of people on those made a submission supported it. Side street changes, people said that they are going to be more, there is going to be improved safety for pedestrians and cyclists. So when you're walking on the Golden Mile at the moment, you come across a number of side streets where you have to stop to and either you have to wait for a car to give way to you, or you're waiting at the traffic signal. And in the future, you will not have to do that. You just provide a continuous pathway all the way, sort of from one end to the other. So people like that option, that there will be much more safer space for people to hang around. And also they like that there was provision for some cycling and active modes in our options. And probably you've seen, in terms of negative feedback, a lot of pushback from retailers and businesses because in their view, the removal of general traffic, removal of on-street parking, and mitigation of loading zones could adversely affect their business viability. And that came quite strongly, specifically after COVID, because they already saw a number of a change in the number of people accessing their stores after COVID, and in their view, taking further parks away and accessibility for cars could further impact on the business. Access for those with limited mobility. There were concerns raised that what about people with disability, people with access mobility issues, people who are needs to be dropped right outside the place they need to visit. How we can arrange that through our options. And what we're sort of saying to people that we still we're going to sort of ensure the accessibility accessibility remains the top priority for us, but that's something we will address through the detailed design. Accessibility for service vehicles. So as the businesses and retailers one of the key issues they said is that relocation of loading zones to side roads means that some of the goods will either take longer time or some of the goods probably may not be able to actually arrive at Golden Mile just because they come in the longer trucks. Some of the side roads are not conducive for longer trucks. So we've taken their feedback on board. So what we are proposing moving forward is that we will have a combination of some loading zones on the Golden Mile. They will have time restrictions during the day, but there will be also a number of loading zones on the side roads. So we're trying to make sure that the accessibility to those for those services remain.
Would a user have to obtain a permit for it? Like, because I do deliveries, but I can park in loading zones because I've got the right type of vehicle. But would I have to obtain a permit to be in that restricted area, like the CBD loading permit or something? Would that,
So one of the things we are considering is that because if your vehicle cannot be accessed from the side to the side road, because of its dimensions or other accessibility requirements, then you do need to get some certain approval from us to actually be able to use the space on the Golden Mile. And one of the things we are investigating is using the use of technology. So it's using like automatic number plate recognition system. So you have that permit, you are accessible, you can access that area at certain times of the day.
What problem is this fixing?
Oh, those investment objectives, as I said in the first slide. So we are planning for the future where we are looking to improve the reliability and efficiency of public transport, and also making this area safe for people and making it more attractive. So that was my slide number 2. So those are the investment objectives which are driving this project as part of the Get Wellington Moving program. So currently the buses are unreliable, and a number of factors goes into that reliability issues around the number of times they have to stop, start, interaction with loading zone vehicles, and interaction with other private motor vehicles, delay in traffic signals. So we're trying to make sure that the buses can be given more priority, and by reducing the number of delay points, you can improve the reliability. So when you expect the bus to arrive, it's not stuck behind another car or another signal. So. And Golden Mile is just one part of the program. We still have Torn and Hub Road, which are making the similar changes, and in the future, city streets and through other projects are making sure that those changes are end to end. So public transport does get more priority than on specific corridors.
So would there be a bus lane that becomes the buses will travel down? So there'll be a raised curb on both sides so that people can't actually cross over into it?
No. So if you see the Lambton here at the moment have got bus lanes already. So so this is basically taking. So if you are standing outside David John's, for example, so the buses going southbound probably will use. So you will still use the bus lane, but on the opposite side of the median. So all the space outside the David John's will be given back to public, and that will be used for more placemaking. So you will have more space to sit around, to wait, for it to be more activated through commercial means, through buskers, through whatever means we can do to make sure the space becomes more vibrant for retailers, businesses, and people to enjoy. So. But the bus lanes will be there. So in terms of the preferred option, which out of those 3 is the option transform. The left side shows when we originally consulted with the community, what we proposed. And the right column shows the changes based on the community and the stakeholder feedback. Originally we proposed all the bus stops to stay in line, and in line means that buses like outside Choose Lane, bus stops there is no way for other buses to pass each other. So there are going to be certain locations where we cannot provide an offline bus stop, but on Lambton Quay and Courtney Place we are proposing now to provide offline, which means that the bus can move inside the curb, offload the passengers, or pick up with the other bus who doesn't need to stop there, can continue. So just making sure it reduces the delay.
Doesn't that mean that number 1 buses, if you have a person wanting a Johnsonville West, the Churton parks at the stop, the bus driver will go, oh, that's a number 1, I'll just bypass the stop, because they think that there's another number 1 in front of them and they'll just bypass the stop?
That probably is the same case which happens right now, if it's already happened, but I understand that every bus driver is supposed to stop at those bus stops. If they choose to not to ignore those, that's
so they've all got to pretty much pull over because they can't see people waiting if there's 2 buses already there. So
No, they have to wait. Yeah. So what we are saying is that
So you can't really bypass if you can or can't see a person there because the person may be waiting for the one that's still moving.
Right. But if you're coming in at the end of the journey, say Courtney Place is your last stop, and you've disembarked most of your passengers, and nobody has pushed the button to get off at a particular stop, then you can actually, if you need to, you can bypass that. Or if the bus standing at the bus stop is now got a problem that it's run on batteries or other issues, you don't need to drag the bus off, so there's still space there for other bus to pass. So that links with the community engagement that the resilience of the network needs to be a priority, that buses can safely pass each other if in that situation, one of the situations. But the bus drivers are supposed to stop at those bus stops, yes.
But they won't be able to bypass if they can't see the people waiting.
But the new bus stop's going to be longer and more visible, so I expect that there should not be a problem. But look, if we have any other feedback, more than happy to take it on.
What would be the projected savings on time going through the Golden Mile versus what it is now for a bus?
So we, in our reports online, we estimated a range up to between 1 to 3 minutes saving for the bus travel from one end of the Golden Mile to the other. And that will improve once Thorn and Kihatro improvements are in place, once other improvements are sort of starting to get a cumulative effect.
Right.
Yeah.
So at maximum efficiency, that 1 to 3 minutes would turn
Per bus, yeah.
per bus. So you said like once you start putting in those other improvements, would it improve past 3 minutes?
Yeah, so I expect that it will be cumulative. It's going to be even further because the Thorn and Kihatro will make the journey more efficient and reliable as well when the buses will arrive into Golden Mile, and then the Golden Mile hopefully improvements have taken place, and so that journey time will be further reduced.
Mm.
But we expect that to between 1 to 3 minutes. Again, it depends on how many times we put the new pedestrian crossing on the MTP or on Courtney Place, because there is a desire for people to also cross safely, and the more crossings we put in there, the more delay points for buses. So that's why there's a range there. It depends on how many we end up with finally. We also proposed in the original concept to remove, to close the end of the Tory Street and into the Lantern Quay, to Courtney Place. But at the moment, we've done further work with the community and the businesses there, and we are proposing to keep it open at the moment. So
what does a closed street look like? You just have some, I don't know, one of those post things.
We're going to work that with the community, so we haven't decided yet. So what we've said is this space is now available for us to use and to maximize. So we're going to talk to the cafes, the bars, restaurants, the retailers around, how best to use the space for them, but also could be a space for people to sit down and enjoy. Yeah.
Is Bond Street an existing version of that at the moment?
No, I would say that we have heard that Bond Street is not a good example of what people have experienced. They definitely want the Golden Mile improvements to be a lot better than what Bond Street is. So there will be like a Grey Street improvements and Cuba Street improvements. So there will be a lot better. We definitely expect them to be a lot better. So, yeah. And we're going to work with the community and stakeholders to make sure we design it properly. Just quickly going through the other changes that loading zones, as I said, we originally proposed to move all the loading zones to side streets, but now we're looking to keep some on the Golden Mile based on the dimensions of the vehicle. So that's something we'll go through in the next phase. Just a quick recap again on the engagement we've done today. As I said, we started back in 2019. We did the engagement. We released the engagement report last year. We also continued with the stakeholder meetings, and that were to better understand the submissions made by the stakeholders. We also did a retail impact assessment, and that came through retailers that my previous comment that the removal of on-street parking from Golden Mile will, in their view, will be detrimental to the retailers. So we did a study looking at the current real estate market, the possible future real estate market based on the changes, how many times the parking gets turnover during the day, so understanding the loss of car parks and what impact that would have in terms of lost revenue. Looking at the across New Zealand's transaction data for Golden Mile, understanding how much transactions go through daily. We also then did an intercept survey of 2,100 people on Golden Mile between 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and asking them a number of questions which were related to what is your mode and purpose of your trip to city? What mode did you use to come to the city? How much you are likely to spend? And if you make these changes to the Golden Mile, will you still come to Golden Mile? Will you still, or do you come more or less? So we just wanted to get some local data behind us so that we can provide some comfort back to retailers and businesses that, look, this is what the people are telling us on street. And those were the results from the survey. And these are based on people we intercepted. So there's only 22% of the people who visited using the private motor vehicle to access the city centre, not the Golden Mile, access the city centre. And out of those 22%, only 3.5% used street parking on Golden Mile. And that just provided that feedback to the retailers that most of the customers probably are not coming from, or they're not using the car parks right outside the Golden Mile. So they could be parking somewhere around the city. So by making these changes, they said that if you see the one on the far side, once changes are made to the Golden Mile, would you visit Golden Mile again? I think 48% said as often as they do now, and then 46% said they would visit more often. So I think
don't they use the Lambton Quay to get to other streets? It's a thoroughfare, so you can't park on it. There's hardly any parking on it anyway. So most people need to access side streets and other streets through Lambton Quay. It's a through street.
So you can still access it through Peterson Street in the changes you're proposing. But here the retailers ask us the question that if you remove on-street parks on Lambton Quay and on Courtney Place, that will be detrimental to our business. So we wanted to provide some comfort back to them actually that not everybody is using those streets. And if they can't find a car park.
I don't think you understand my question or what I was saying. That 3.5% use on-street parking on the Golden Mile is the Golden Mile Lambton Quay.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, so that would be correct because most people don't park there anyway.
Yeah.
But they use it to access other premises, other businesses, other retailers. It's a route to get to places. So that, to me, that figure is not telling us anything.
What they're telling us is.
Because if you take all that street, if you take that access, because you're talking about access for cars down there, aren't you?
Yeah, access and car parks both.
Yeah, but you're not talking about access on here. So how are people going to access other businesses that are within a mile of are you going to push all that parking down one other street?
No, so the side streets still have parking and you can access the side
Not
street.
talking about parking, I'm talking about access,
So
driving to get from one part of the city to the other.
So the Peterson Street, it will be the access point to access those side streets.
So are they going to have like turnaround areas at the end of every street so you can turn around and get out again?
Correct.
So it'd be like cul-de-sacs, basically.
So we're gonna be designing it, yes, and no,
Cul-de-sacs,
so,
essentially,
yeah,
yeah.
that's right, yeah. So it is, and then give that space back to people, yeah, that's right. But accessibility is still maintained on those side streets through Peterson Street. So some of the streets needs to be two-way, they're currently one-way.
Something that would be interesting to think about is I spent the last 7 years in Sydney, and they kind of have a very similar setup on George Street. Instead of a Golden Mile of buses, it's a big old tram now. And it works, but then there's the other side of when you reduce all that potential parking, it changes the perception. People go into the car parks and the car parks hike the prices way up to a point where there are other forms of parking, but I think there should be consideration to the stability of those car park prices, because in Sydney it's so insane that, unless you have a really good reason to go into the city, if you live in those outer suburbs, you won't, because you don't want to pay those prices anymore. And that could be where it ends up going. The more restrictive those car park spaces go, and people end up getting forced into car parks. So that'd be probably just something for consideration.
No, we'd absolutely consider it. And I think just to put it into perspective, the car park loss through this project is around 1% of the total car park spaces available in the city centre. However, we have received a number of feedback from public that, since the earthquake, a lot of car park buildings have been lost and they haven't been replaced. So we have passed on that information back to the city council. to sort of, they're ultimately responsible for like, so car parks, and also the private operators. So how they reflect in their prices, we don't know at the moment. But these car parks are only sort of 1%. So you still have a lot of choice around quarter mile to actually be able to access car parks. And that's why we asked that question that if you take these park away, will you still continue to visit even though you know the pricing? And a lot of people, those people we intercepted said that will continue to visit.
It'd just be interesting seeing how that perception changes if those car parks then hike up the prices because they're like, well, there's only X amount of car parks to park in.
I really think that's
car
already
parking's the
happening.
issue here. I
Anyway.
think people are missing the point. The issue is how we use our vehicles going around those streets. You imagine it that you can't access any of those side streets via Acton Quay. You can't get up Fuller Street. You're going to have to go another route. You can't, at the moment, you can go around in like squares or like cubes. You can go around and find where you need to get to. Now you're not going to be able to do that. You're only going to be able to go down one main drag. It'll get totally congested.
Pickups and drop-offs.
Well, the other one is, was it say how many parks are available at each street as you go down along? So,
Yeah.
So if it says it's full, don't bother driving down it because you're going to waste your time. Whereas at the moment,
And will it be free buses? Like in Sydney, you can't drive in, they're not Sydney, Perth, they have free public transport in a zone. So you can jump on and off and it's all free within a particular zone. So you don't have to mess around with payments and cards and buying this, that and the other.
So we asked that question. I came through inner city residents meeting as well around, the specific question was, will we look into making it free for kids, public transport? So we passed back that to Greater Wellington, and they said that they will consider that as part of the integrated ticketing work. They're looking at the whole fare structure. So I mean that's the position at the moment, that they will consider it.
It's not free for everybody, just free for children.
But that is just, that they were answering a specific question, but I haven't asked whether you would make it free for everyone.
But okay, you're talking about, people getting people out of cars, but what about weekend free travel? Sort of like have people come into town where they don't have to pay for transport to get into town.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be
Great idea,
attractive.
yeah.
Because I'm sorry, I'm a bit of an old bugger, but I've got a buggered back, but you don't want to walk around heaps and you just go in a car because it's convenient.
Yeah.
But if you'd probably like the idea of free transport in the weekend, that would get people going in the city at night and going in the city in the day. So if you want to make it vibrant in the weekends and not have the clusterfuck, traffic that you had in the weekend right at the moment, that would be quite good. And then everyone gains and no one's discriminated.
Yeah, so we absolutely, I mean, those are the questions, feedback we pass on back to regional council. Fears are looking at a review of the fears and whether it's be subsidies, not part of our remit, but we definitely pass it on back to regional council for them to consider.
this is
So,
something
sorry, can I just interrupt you? I know you haven't quite finished your presentation, so I know there's a question Q&A, we want to have questions and that sort of thing. But can I just I'll get you guys to hold up for a little minute? Yeah. Move with the question and just let you finish your
Thanks.
presentation.
Just I don't have many slides to go, so I'll just get quickly again. So the next step for us is to do the detailed design, and that's something we will be commencing shortly. But again, all those questions we need to understand and talk to delivery companies, to retailers and businesses around the location of the loading zone, the accessibility requirements, how many we can, sort of what time of the day works for them in terms of interpeak times, what are their requirements, so we're going to work that through. Loading again, indented bus stops, I think we already covered that. The other thing around social issues, so we're working with Wellington City and Place and the retail and the businesses in Courtney Place. And there is a project called the Porirua Promise, which is Wellington City-led project, and that is to reduce the social harm through by ensuring that the place, Courtney Place, is safe. So we're going to be working with them to improve street lighting, to providing more safety opportunities to make sure that the people feel safe at night time. Also, there's other projects which are happening within the program around MRT, which is Mass Rapid Transit, City Streets, which is looking at public transport improvements at a wider scale, and also cycling improvements. So we need to make sure that through the detailed design we integrate with that work later this year and next year. And also develop a sequenced approach in terms of construction. So currently aiming end of 22, early 23 construction start. We want to make sure that the impact during construction is minimal for retailers and businesses. So again, we're going to develop a construction methodology, working with the businesses to make sure that their business viability stays. They can still operate the businesses while we are rebuilding the Golden Mile. And you probably have seen some of the images, which is again, the reason we show these images is the potential it has now to redesign the space with your help and with other communities' help. But it just shows that how you're going to use the space. And this is just one example of Midland Park, what we could do, but we can easily bring more green space further out onto the curb. It provides just more space for people to actually feel safe. And we want to make sure that the space is designed for people, not for vehicles. And then just the Courtney Place looking towards MC. Again, it's just an example, but definitely want to make sure that the final design meets the requirements of the businesses and the people who are going to use Courtney Place in the future. Just moving forward, we're just looking to finish the business case. So we are in July, finishing our draft business case later this year, looking to get approvals by November. We're also looking at opportunities to commence detailed design next month onwards, and we will be coming back to the community with a detailed engagement plan, how we're going to get our stakeholders and community involved in the detailed design. We still have an eye on construction starting late 22, but a lot of things needs to happen to make that deadline, so that timeline. But we're working behind the scenes. And that's it for me. I'm more than happy to answer any questions, but just quickly want to give a bit of an update on other parts of the program, especially a short-term program, which is Porirua Road. So you've seen the consultation closed for Porirua Road, and they will be looking to do the construction in a similar time frame, later next year. And so we need to synchronize with them. We're also looking to, part of the program is also looking to plan the cycleway to the CBD to connect the Hutt cycleway on the Hutt Road and how that goes through the CBD. So that's just, the route is not confirmed yet. So we need to make sure that whatever we do through Golden Mile needs to integrate with the cycleway. So the previous envisaged route was Featherstone Street, but we will see how that integrates. Also, the big rocks like MRT, which is the Mass Rapid Transit and State Highway, that could be coming later this year for public engagement. So I don't know exact the time frame, but the expectation is to probably come sometime before Christmas. And then we'll tell the wider story in the program how the second spine, public transport spine, which is the MRT, how will that go to the city and what are the possible options it has, and similarly state highway improvements as well. That's it from me. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yes. So,
That Danish consultancy company that the council paid a lot of money to come over here to give advice on this. Yeah. What input have they actually had into this?
So the Gale study, so they've been working in the background, and they had talked to us around the options we looked at and how we're looking to redesign Golden Mile. So they are about to come out with their report. Mm-hmm. And once that report is made public, we will be able to show people how that one integrates with Golden Mile. But there's a lot of synchronization in terms of where they see how the space could be used a lot better in the future for people.
Mm-hmm.
Did you refer to the report that they'd done earlier in the 80s? Or was it in the 80s? I don't know, I'm just guessing.
Oh, there was a report done back.
Which was just completely ignored by the same company.
Yes, that was 2012 or 20.
Was it
there was a report done at that time. And that information, I understand, fed into when they looked at developing the Get Wellington Moving program. But I think now it's time for us to shape the space, and now that's why we recommission it again, to make sure now they can bring us the latest what's happening around the world in terms of how we make the space more attractive to people.
So they surveyed the people on the street, like outside the Opera House and places like that. They didn't survey anybody that could have shopped there and was currently shopping in Porirua, Petone, anywhere else?
No, we didn't went wider than the Golden Mile or the surrounding streets. Yeah.
So they don't know why they're not shopping there, and they don't know what would bring them back.
No, we only wanted to. At the moment, we only intercepted people who are coming to Golden Mile to shop or the side streets. But somebody else has raised this point in the past in other engagements why we're not going and talking to other suburban centres. I'll pass that on to Wellington City to see if that's something that will be done later on.
If I shop a lot in Petone, then why am I only shopping there?
Yeah, because that's what's happening here. I mean, we live in the northern suburbs and we just go to Tony or go out to Porirua. And then, yeah, we do tend to not go in Lambton Key in that area very often, very infrequently.
Yeah, so I understand Wellington City is working on something called economic development strategy, which is part of that is a retail strategy. So they are looking to make it a niche market in Wellington. So one of the proposals is and they're working with the retail industry how to make sure that that people come to Wellington because there is something special there rather than it's competing against others.
Has this been budgeted for?
Yes, it has, yeah. But again, we haven't gone through the final approvals yet. So that is when I showed my previous slide.
So this is included as part of the current rate fixing
Yes.
by the council and the regional council.
So the latest LTP, we have provided our estimate into the latest.
Has it been budgeted? Is it in budget?
It is, I've been told it's in the council's long-term program, which has been approved by the council. If that's what you mean by the budget, it's in the LTP.
Well, it's in budget that there is, that's increased our rates by 16%.
Yes.
I've got one observation and one question. My observation is the presentation is quite technical, and me as a non-transport person, like your question, I don't get the compelling case to do anything. And I don't get confidence. All the options have been considered, particularly the trade-offs between economic, social, cultural, environmental well-being. So I felt obliged to make that observation. My question, go to the next slide, please. I just forget what it's called. How can I get confidence to represent the members of my suburb that the Let's Get Wellington Moving program has a compelling case, the way forward is the best public value, and that those well-beings have been traded off, and it supports the future strategy of Wellington.
So what I didn't cover today, there is a lot of background technical work done and assessments done, which are available on the website. So after public engagement for Golden Mile, for example, we did run the multi-criteria analysis workshop, which looked at all three options from a perspective of the ability to achieve investment objectives, but also their social, environmental, and economic impacts. So,
yeah, so I wasn't asking for it. I'm not for detail. If I went to the Marae in my suburb and I had 10 minutes to explain to the Marae board what this is about, where do I get that from?
So you get that from our website, which is an executive summary document. So an executive summary document is sitting on our website, which is a couple of pages, which tells us the whole story of the Golden Mile in 3 or 4 pages. Yeah.
No, I'm after the Let's Get Wellington Moving.
Oh, what is Let's Get Wellington Moving is all about? Sorry, what's the question?
So my observation is I'm not convinced it's worth investing in the Golden Mile because I don't see the compelling, I don't see the problem.
So the compelling case.
No, I don't need nuts now.
No.
So I don't want to take up this time. My question is, where do I find out more about that to give me confidence that the rates that my residents in my suburb are paying are contributing towards something that's high public value for the future of Wellington to enable the success of Wellington?
So there are 2 documents I would refer to. The one is called the Case for Change, and that is on our website, which I can make a link to Tony if you want to distribute. And that is puts the compelling case. Why do we need to change things on the Golden Mile? It's called Case for Change. And so it lines up all the problems currently faced by Golden Mile and also what the potential future problems it will face if we don't change.
And what about the options and the trade-offs?
So the options, there is a long list report which we looked at over 200 options. Therefore, how we mitigate those problems. We looked at over 200 options, and we narrowed that down to those 3 options through the shortlisting process. So those reports are also made public at the time, but this is how we arrived at those 3 options. And this is the breadth of the options we have considered when we in terms of finding out how we resolve those problems. So those are the reports. So Case for Change, long list to shortlist options report, and then the shortlist options report.
So I just want to jump in a wee bit because Johnsonville Community Association has been reasonably heavily involved with all of this stuff and has taken a long time to get to this point. So I just want to give you our view of that, your information is Bocate and Brickbats. So first of all, this program is what's it called,
So,
it's the early wins, or
yeah, now it's called short-term program.
short-term program, called short-term program, and it was probably put together because the long-term program was taking forever. And in the short-term program is a number of things mainly focused on improving bus and pedestrian access. That includes Thorndon Quay, and they're going to have a bus lane along Hutt Road in Thorndon Quay. That's one of the big changes. And there's going to be a bus that's going to move cars off the Golden Mile to let buses go through. My other observation is that the proposal they're going forward, where they block those streets off, what they're really going to do is take the harbour side of Wellington Quay and really put it as a big wide pedestrian crossing, a big wide pedestrian, and when we mean wide, it could be 4 or 5 metres in depth, right across into the road, and move the buses onto the shady side, and there will be no other cars. Which goes, that's what's happening. That's the proposal. I think that so the money's there because it's only about 300 million.
This one is between 52 to 79 million.
Yeah, 52 to 79 million. So, $2 billion for mass transit, 52 to 79 million for the bus service. So the money's there. It's not huge, but it's going to cause your rates to
Just
go
a
up.
question on that.
Yeah.
In regard to the rates increases that we're paying for, in regard to the infrastructure, I think I got it right, you've got a commencement date for all of this of 2022.
Yeah, late years.
Does the infrastructure get fixed first, or do you do this and then do the infrastructure?
You're talking about the water pipes.
Yes, I'm talking about water pipes, the sewage down through Langton Quay, the junctions down through that part of town. Has that all been planned to be done before you start commencing this in 2022, or is it done simultaneously?
So that's something we will work with Wellington Water in the detail design phase. As we said, we haven't even commenced the detail design yet. We needed to have an option to proceed with, and now we have got an option.
Yeah.
And now the next step is, so we got services plans. We know we are doing a ground penetrating radar testing of the entire Golden Mile. We're working with Wellington Water, Wellington Electricity, and the next step will be to look at where their work and our work have opportunities, and we will ask them to bring that work forward to be done at the same time. So that's what we're going to do in the next 12, 18 months. So that's going to be detailed design and planning.
So I just wanted to also say, so things are happening. That's the good news. I think for northern suburbs, our real issue, because we're 10 k's out. So, cycling, there's a 1% mode up here. We're really a bus or car choice suburb. So reduce car access to circulate around the CBD, yes. Improve bus access. That's positive. Okay. In terms of the factors, though, I would make the observation that recently the factors were reviewed and changed, and the factor around access, okay, was reduced, which wasn't even that high, it was reduced to 15% of all the factors. And there are other factors like CO2 emissions and mode shift and other things will ramp right up high. And so, there is a concern, and it's sort of partly reflected, I think, in some of this other feedback is that, are you listening? Because are those factors the factors that this community would want? Because what we want is we want to be able to get in and out of the CBD. Up in northern suburbs, we're going to get really smashed with the spatial plan. Johnsonville alone is going to get 6,000 more people. And the assumption is that they're going to take public transport. And so, and that applies right through Kandala and also north up to Tawa and all that sort of stuff. So public transport capability is enormously important from here. And there seems to be a bit of a gap in terms of the service support out of the widely scaled Wellington Moving program. So on the plus side, get some runs on the board with the bus lanes, what you guys are doing, which is great. So, support that. Wider, I have to agree with this gentleman. I'm not sure, going by what factors in the way you pitch stuff, that you're really listening and focusing on the main thing. Because the main thing of Let's Get Wellington Moving is to get Wellington moving, and lots of the factors and lots of the changes you're doing are not going to contribute towards that. It's almost like the program might be somewhat hijacked, and therefore we feel a bit disconnected. So that's some feedback, I think, you want to take. And so, and so I'm going to use also my chairman's prerogative to cut this discussion off with what I want to say, unless you want to make any final comments or.
No, I think we just want, I think the final comment is that the 12 to 18 months are going to be quite detailed design, working with our stakeholders, so with the Johnsonville Community Association, I just want to continue that dialogue and making sure your members are part of that design, so make sure that it works for you as well. So when you are out there, there's a lot of experience here, a lot of knowledge here, so we want to make sure that we tap into everything.
And so also we've got inside Newlands. So, you know, we've got a lot of northern suburb here, so be engaged. We run these things monthly, and so we welcome you to come back in a few months' time. Thank you very much, Eddie. Thank you. So can everyone please thank Eddie for his time. So we're going to do a bit of a swapperoo on so now we've got Wellington Water who are going to come along. So welcome to Steve and Richard, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
So while you get set up, I'll just make a couple of other announcements. So first of all, JCA, we meet on the last Wednesday of each month at the Johnsonville Community Centre. Anyone's welcome from Johnsonville, and other people come along too. We should visit each other's meetings more often. But the other thing that we've got coming up is we're helping build up Totra Park, and Totra Park is off Cortina Avenue, and we're having another working day at Totra Park this weekend. And so if anyone wants to partake, who doesn't know about that, to help fix up Totra Park, please just go onto the website, JCA website, and johnsonville.org.nz, and just make a contact or send an email. Thanks very much. So now I'm going to let these guys introduce their own topic, Steve and Richard, and because it's a wee bit technical, but and also it doesn't necessarily affect all of Johnsonville, all of Newland, so I think probably that's the place to start about what we're talking about, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. Thanks for having us along. So my name's Steve Hutchison. I'm with Wellington Water. Just for the record, we do talk to Let's Get Wellington Moving about infrastructure. So tonight's talk, and Richard Peterson, who gets the microphone.
Yeah, so I'm Richard. I'm a planner, so I'm working on a few of the projects that Steve's going to talk to. So he's going to do most of the speaking, and I'll just sit here and perhaps answer questions.
So as you can see, we've got the logo on for Porirua City, and that's because this work that we're talking about is largely focused on the wastewater that flows from basically Middleton Road, down towards Porirua catchment. So you'll have to bear with me if you're on the other side. We'll talk about wastewater issues on this side of the catchment in a year or two.
Yeah, so just to be clear, you've got a catchment map in your presentation?
Yeah, right on the back, I've got a detailed one. This is this.
Oh, yes, okay, so when you can cover off exactly.
Yep. Okay, so we've got quite a range of issues. We've got quite a range of issues we're going to cover tonight. This is mainly a sort of information session, but we're really keen on feedback and thoughts on issues that are on affecting you and that are happening. So it's going to cover 5 topics. First of all, the sort of network improvement planning for the Porirua catchment, which Wellington contributes 30% towards, so it's a big part of Wellington. Work we're doing on cross connections and faults that are a significant impact on pollution. Some of the improvement projects we've got around what we call storage tank down in the Porirua City Centre, work at the Porirua treatment plant, and the overflow resource consent application, which is just starting. So that's the agenda. I'm happy to take questions as we go in the discussion. We'll just see how it goes. I think we've got up to 40 minutes.
So just to let you know, we're also doing live on YouTube. And so I'm just from in front of you there, so you can look that way, and why you get your questions.
Yep, great. Okay, so the Porirua Wastewater Network mainly serves Porirua City, of course, but it was traditionally called the Porirua Drainage Authority, and so it included the northern suburbs of Wellington, all of Tawa, all of Sherman Park, and then parts of Paparangi and Johnsonville. In terms of balance between Porirua and Wellington, there's, like I said, about 30% currently in Wellington. Now, the main issue that we're dealing with and working to improve over time is wet weather overflows. And that's when you get a lot of stormwater gets into the wastewater pipes and overloads their capacity, and the wastewater bubbles up out of manholes and into streams. We also have issues with blockages when pipes block because they're old or because material that can block them gets flushed down there. And as you will have heard in the media over the last couple of years, there's been, it's an aging network. A lot of it was put in the 50s and 60s, and it's had some faults that you don't hear about. It's had some spectacular faults last year, which were quite visibility. And growth, of course, there's a huge amount of growth planned in both Porirua and Wellington North, and that's, for scale, we're talking just over 40% growth we're planning for over the next 20 odd years.
Can I just ask a question there? I'm getting a bit confused. You're talking about when you get a lot of heavy rain, that water goes into the wastewater, so it goes into the sewage. Isn't there one pipe for stormwater and one for sewage pipe?
There is. We've got separate systems.
Yeah.
But there's quite a lot of cross connection goes on. I've got some photos later on showing some of the faults that lead to that cross connection.
Yep.
So the wastewater pipes are designed for 4 times average flow. So we make some allowance in the design for some stormwater to get in. But over time, there's just been so much get in that we're being overloaded regularly.
So just to clarify, what's the difference? We're talking wastewater is.
Wastewater is sewage,
Thank
basically.
you.
Yeah.
Maybe we use that word and it helps us understand what you're talking about.
Brown and
Sometimes
storm.
it confuses people. They think it's water that we don't need and it's wasted.
Give us
the word sewage, we will understand.
Sure.
Thank you.
So one more thing. What's growth in this context? Growth of what?
Population growth.
Oh, okay, right. Yeah.
So like I was saying, we're planning for about just over 40% more population in this area over the next 20 odd years. A lot of that's the greenfield divisions, subdivisions, which are going on, Shooting Park and so on. And I understand there's quite a bit of infill, the spatial plan might be a topic. So when we look at the Porirua wastewater catchment network, this map's focused on Porirua. The first step we did was plot the effective rainfall on the wastewater system capacity, and those little dots are where, when you get big storm events like we had last weekend, the system doesn't have enough capacity for the stormwater that gets into it, and it spills out the contaminated sewage. And that little box on the left, and I've got a better map on the next slide, that's the northern Wellington part of that wide system. And so we've been through a big exercise to take that, add the growth, and look forward to how we can reduce those overflows, because we're getting, down in Porirua, we're getting about 10 times a year we're spilling sewage into the Porirua harbour. That's been quite a big deal for them. So there's especially with growth, environmental improvements, we're working to enable growth but reduce environmental impacts.
So how does that compare to what's happening in the harbour?
Which harbour? Porirua or Wellington? Wellington, we get a similar amount of overflows, but not quite as large. And the Porirua harbour's got less flushing in it, it's lower energy, so it's more effective. It's a very shallow harbour. So the graph on the right shows the infrastructure improvements that have been penciled in through the Porirua long-term plan, which Wellington contributes part to for the treatment plant and the big pump stations. And that's a plan that's in there at the moment. It'll be developed over the years, but that's the base plan. So it's quite a lot of extra pipes and storage tanks, pump station upgrades, and then the shaded area of pink is where we're targeting particularly to reduce the stormwater. That Porirua East catchment just seems to have been developed in a way that a lot more stormwater is getting into it. There's a lot of work underway to reduce that through the Kainga Ora redevelopment of Porirua East. Back to Northern Wellington. So that's a detailed map showing that sort of hydraulic model where we expect we'll be getting overflows in those heavy storm events. So those little blue dots, that's where we expect that we'll see manhole lids popping and sewage escaping on rainfall events like we had last weekend, which was probably about a 1 in 5 year type event.
Right, so you can just see, so this is State Highway 1 going through here, And this is Johnsonville North, is around here, isn't it?
Yeah, so
And Peppering is in here, just in case people are trying to look at where things are at. And up here, you've got like Granada Village and that sort of thing about here.
yeah. So yeah, the red dots are where the main constructed overflows are, and they mostly down towards the bottom of the system. We've got quite a few spots in Tawa and a few spots in Sherman Park where we're having issues that are affecting people's property and the local environment. So in order to address that, there's a lot of work going on about the asset condition inspection. As I mentioned, that's been a hot topic, just getting a better understanding of how these pipes are aging. And we've got some of those up in northern Wellington. In terms of upgrades in this part of the place, apart from little renewals, there's work going on to enable the upper steppings development, which you're probably familiar with, and quite a bit of work down in Harbour on the stormwater. Suffer a bit of flooding. So in the last couple of years, we've been down in Sherman Park looking at some of those problem areas on that map, looking for stormwater inflow and trying to reduce those. So we've learned from experience and internationally that a lot of the issues we get with the overloading are back on private property, and that although when properties are inspected, when the building consent goes through, over time modifications get made and the stormwater gets in, which got photos coming up soon. So by length of pipe work, fun fact is about half of the length, because of the laterals from the house to the boundary are private property owners, and that's about half of the overall length of the network, which can allow groundwater to get in, as well as the stormwater back at the gully traps. We've started an initiative with 3 of our councils we work for, and we're targeting at the moment Untitled Bay, Porirua Bay, and Wastewater to have a closer look and just really get a better understanding of the state of the pipes and the gully traps on the private property. We'll move on to other catchments as based on the need.
What will you do when you get a better understanding of what the...
The ones the faults we find, we'll ask people to fix, obviously. And then the better understanding is more about how much of the effort goes into the different parts of the solution. So if it turns out that the biggest issue is on the private side, we'll probably put more resource into looking for those faults.
Can I just confirm where the laterals actually run from? So the lateral is actually the pipe not from the house toby or the street toby to the main water supply?
That's probably with the water supply. With the wastewater, the lateral is from the gully traps at the house.
Oh, yeah.
I'll show you some photos in a minute. It used to be to the council main, but there's a change of policy in the last Wellington City plan just a couple of months ago to be to the boundary. So the boundary of the house. If there's a council main on your property, then it runs up to the council main.
Oh, yeah.
So the issue there was that the road reserve part was just really expensive for homeowners to manage if there was a repair or a replacement needed. So the council made the call and consulted to take responsibility for that part back.
Yeah.
So here are some of the faults we find out there in the houses. That photo is just showing smoke coming back up somewhere it shouldn't come up. There's a water trap between where the smoke's been blown and the vent. The little photos are someone's added an extra downpipe to somewhere it shouldn't. So those gully traps, that are either the white plastic or the concrete surround, they're only for water from inside the house to get into. The building code's pretty clear that you're not allowed to put stormwater from your roof into those. A lot of people don't know that. People do DIY and so on, and mistakes get made, and we have to track them down and try and undo them. And the photo on the right is another example. There's a gully trap under all that rubbish, but someone's innovatively put an extra drain down into it. This is some example of those gully traps I was mentioning. Building code, they have to be 20 mil above sealed ground, but then the consent might get done, and then someone might do some landscaping a few years later and drain it down to the gully trap. So they're fairly simple fixes. They just involve raising those gully traps, really, raising the edge of the gully traps. And those are, some people often ask why there are gully traps in the first place, and the point of those is to stop sewage from backing up if there's a blockage and getting inside your house. So people from the UK don't understand them.
It's better if it backs up outside your house than inside.
Yeah, they're very carefully set just to pull over floor levels. Yeah, definitely don't want it overflowing inside your house. So those are common faults. We'll find about 10% of houses we go to have a fault like that. So it's a widespread issue.
So do you have to get permission to go onto a property to look at this, or?
We ask first.
Yeah, but.
We do have powers under the
You
Local
do have
Government
powers,
Act.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
How often is there a refusal?
No comment. It's interesting, the
Do
different
you go
neighbourhoods.
back and
I don't like it.
Do you go back and check that they've remediated?
Yeah. So there's a process of saying, hey, we've got inspectors in the area, we're coming on. And then it's mainly a visual inspection, looking for these really obvious faults. And then we'll send people a nice letter saying, hey, we found this, can you please fix it? We'll go back, check it. And then if after the check hasn't been fixed, then the next letter is a little bit stronger. And ultimately, local government has powers that we can just do the work and charge it to the rates. We try not to go there, obviously.
Is there any, have you got any information on the extent to which on property issues like this contribute X% to the problem, the fundamental problem you're trying to address about, stormwater, upsetting wastewater?
Overloading wastewater. Yeah, it's at least 50%.
Wow.
So there's there are some, it varies, and there was some really good research done by North Shore City Council showing sort of ratios. But it's at least 50% of the problems on that private side. And these are often simple faults that it's more cost effective to fix these and to fix the source than to go putting in big pipes and big holding tanks. Yeah.
So if I've got 4,000 residents, 4,000 homes in my suburb, 400 of them probably contributed to 50% of the problem.
Yeah.
So
Well, how come you haven't sent something out to all the residents associations explaining this in simple language so we can circulate it around our communities and encourage them to?
Yeah, we've got some great brochures, and we've certainly been doing a lot of work in Kalori recently in the Porirua Bay. We've got information. We'll send you links and pamphlets.
Who's authorised to do that? Is it only Wellington Water, or could any plumber do it?
Oh, yeah, no. It's usually a plumber issue. You're allowed under the Plumbing Drain Layers Gas Fitting Act of, I can't remember, 2006, to do the work yourself as long as you do it to a decent standard.
But it'll be used pays.
Yeah. So this is a private asset, so it's a private, it's a household's responsibility to just make sure their own plumbing's up to code.
So if I was to go to my residents and say that, but I also say we could do a commercial deal with someone that if they have 400 homes, I get a 50% discount.
Well, you got 400 homes.
But who would I do that?
You'd be more than welcome to. Love that sort of thing to happen. There's a bit of a building boom going on at the moment, so plumbers and drainers are quite busy.
Sure.
So that would help. Yeah.
Would that be an initial chat with Wellington Water, or
probably be with finding a? It could be. Usually we only get involved at the last minute. If things haven't happened, we try not to get involved in bureaucracy.
With that building boom, is impermeable surface on the Great Rise a big problem?
Yeah, so that's more of a stormwater issue for the streams, and so there's a lot of work going on. A lot of the new buildings have to put holding tanks into their stormwater that then trickle out stormwater after the big rain.
But they're big concrete driveways and big patios.
Yeah,
they don't help.
So they mainly go to the streams, and the main issue with those concrete driveways is the stormwater gets into the streams quicker and causes more erosion. If everyone's done everything according to the building code, it doesn't trouble the wastewater system.
But if they're small
But
enough, it'd be
there
tanks.
are mitigations being required for a lot of the new builds. It's mainly for roof area about having to put holding tanks for stormwater, but then buffer the flow. I'm a wastewater guy, but I can't speak with authority on the stormwater rules around here. But I know a lot of the councils have been bringing those rules in through district plan changes. That's just a little smoke machine. So we often put that over manholes, and that just helps find pipes that are, badly affected that you can't see easily from visual. Looking above ground, one of the other tools we use is dye. This is a non-toxic dye, so we'll put it into either the stormwater or the wastewater system if we've got doubts about where it's connecting to, and occasionally it turns up somewhere it shouldn't be connecting to. It's quite a
Looks like radiant fluid.
I'm told it's not toxic.
Do we need
It's very
to-
bright. It's very
So
bright.
when you put the green dye in, that's going down your sewage wastewater.
Yeah.
So when we see that in our streams, we know there's a problem.
Generally,
Okay,
Yeah.
that's useful to know, because we get a lot of that happening in the stream going down Middleton Road, and we usually Facebook it, so what's going on. I didn't realise that was someone's.
it's usually our contractors just confirming where something's going.
Oh, it could be that, right, yeah. That sounds,
Hopefully
that's
it's not
fake.
painters putting washing paintbrushes.
Thank you.
And then little robotic cameras to go up pipes. They're another technique. And see that little pipe there has just been shattered by ground settling over time. So it's
Double decker buses.
Trees, roots.
trees are our enemy as well, especially moving towers. They've got a real tendency to grow into drains and then cause blockages, which then require someone plumber to come and clear, and they can clear them for so long eventually the pipe needs replacing. So there are a few poor condition pipes not aging gracefully out there. In terms of the improvements, you guys probably aren't as worried about this one, but down in Porirua, just north of the railway station car park, the motorway side of the stream, we're putting in a very large holding tank, like a 7 million litres, 50 metres long and 30 metres wide and 6 metres high, to hold the wastewater that's currently diluted with stormwater, enhanced by stormwater, but it's spilling into the Porirua harbour. So that's a big project. It's a $40 million project, which is underway to deal with the symptoms of this issue. It's also helping support the growth in the Porirua East. But, it's making there. So last year I had 9 overflows into the Porirua harbour from that side. And this tank would have held 8 of them. Wouldn't have held Saturday's event. It was huge. But it will make a really big difference to the harbour. And
Is there only one water treatment, wastewater treatment in Wellington? So everything goes to Mile Point, does it?
there's 4. So we've got a little plant in Karori, the basin side of Karori, 10,000 people there. We've got the biggest plant is in Mile Point that takes this side of Johnsonville, south of Middleton Road, and all the other suburbs in Wellington City. And then we've got the Porirua treatment plant, this one here, and then that little gully back the farm. That takes all the Porirua City and northern Wellington. So it's about 90,000 people go to Porirua. And then the Hutt Valley's got the same plant. Of course, it takes all of Upper Hutt, Lower Hutt, Marta.
Where's their plant?
Their plant's in Seaview in the industrial area, south of the Waikato Stream. And they've got a long outfall that pumps all the way down past the Pincarra Lighthouse. It's like 18 kilometre long pipe. Breaks occasionally. It's another story. So all of Chetton Park and North Wellington goes down to this plant. It's see Titahi Bay there. This is a nice Google Earth view. And it's tucked over the back. So the pumping station on the road between Porirua Central and Titahi Bay, and it pumps up and through a tunnel that was built in the late 80s to take that flow. And so it's got an outfall just by what's called Rukatane Point, which is where the original outfall used to go to the water treatment plant went. So it comes back towards Titahi Bay a little bit. But at the moment, that plant can treat about 1,000 litres a second of wastewater. And because we got all this growth, we're upping it to 1,500, so upping it 50% to deal with, the 40% growth expected in 20, 25 years and a bit beyond. The growth projections are always difficult, I've been working this for 25 years, and 15 years ago we were expecting a decline. Now we're expecting a boom, so it's a bit hard to know, but either way, there's a lot of extra capacity being put in there to deal with it. And so that work's underway at the moment. It'll be finished sometime around 2023. And because these treatment plants are basically usually given about 20 years consent by the Regional Council under the Resource Management Act, that plant's reached its 20-year consent, and so it's currently going through the process of applying to the next 20 years consent. So it's still open for consultation.
Another week.
Yep.
Does that involve the need for upgrades and further capital expenditure?
So there's been a lot of studies about the effects of the wastewater on the receiving environment and how it mixes and dilutes, and the risk to public health at Titahi Bay. Lots of studies, a few hundred pages worth, which has come to the conclusion that it's, even with the growth, with the slightly enhanced level of treatment, with more capacity, that's still acceptable, but it's not a significant impact. It's never going to be perfect. Discharging the wastewater, even no matter how you treat it, it's going to be controversial, especially to Ngāti Taua, because it's discharging water. And but yeah, so that's going through. It's been notified a couple of months ago, and it's receiving submissions, and it will go through the process of having commissioners decide whether the application is suitable and hope that with conditions, or whether it's not accepted and goes back to drawing board. So yeah. And last but not least, these network overflows. So a lot of these haven't been consented under the Resource Management Act historically. It's sort of been viewed as, well, it happens, there's an emergency. So times have changed, and the Regional Council made it clear they want those to be more actively managed. And so we're going through a process for each catchment, and we're doing Porirua first and Hutt first, and we'll be moving to Wellington next, just going through a process of looking at the catchment, saying this are the overflows that we know about, these are the effects, and getting a consent which sets up a framework to improve those progressively over time. Yep. And this is the sort of the process that we're going through. And there's a lot of, iwi have got very, very strong views on wastewater discharges and overflows, and so the proposal is to set up basically a working group, joint council, joint iwi, to decide the very controversial topic of what standard is acceptable. So being an engineer, we just give us a number and we'll go for it. But this is fairly big dollars, and it's a real social judgment call. So that's the process we're setting up for that resource consent. And that'll express itself in basically a number of how many overflows a year is acceptable, and we always get no overflows are acceptable, but then we say, well, how much do you want to spend, because it has a direct impact on rates, and it's that balance of environmental impact, social acceptability, cost that needs to be found.
Aren't there any nationally applicable standards on this? Like, so every council can decide how much pop they want flowing around.
Yep. Yep. The Resource Management Act is quite based on local community feeling, and so there's no national standard on 2 a year or 5 a year or 1 a year or 1 every 10 years. It's a little bit unusual, New Zealand's approach to this environmental regulation.
Mm-hmm.
Those engineers of us who work in this field were asked some standards to make it a bit clearer, give a baseline at least, and there's some thought going into that at the moment, but there's no current standard. And it does change around the country depending on rainfall and depending on the sensitivity of the environment. So if you go to a dry place like Christchurch, they'll get a lot less overflows, sewage overflows. You go to a wet place like Auckland, they've still got an old combined sewer system part of their, so the stormwater by design goes in. They've got heaps. They've got way more than we have down here. So it's quite variable around the country. Yeah. I mean, Wellington, because of its age and because of its got a reasonable rainfall, about 1,200 millimetres a year, we probably get more than average because we've also we've built our communities quite densely. And the density is increasing, of course, with plan changes and so on.
You have to throw in the complexity of climate change as well.
Oh, yeah.
More rain, therefore.
Yeah, so climate change is a really big deal for stormwater.
Yeah.
For wastewater, we're mainly dealing with average, I say average, not so frequent flows. So we worked out to about 17% intensity of rainfall that we plan for in the models. So yeah, it definitely gets considered these days.
Surely all this would have an implication on the sub-councillors now wanting greater intensification in the CBD. I mean, you have a lot more people in there, and if the system can't cope with it now, do they actually consider that when they're looking at? Yeah,
so we gave some advice, I think it was in the paper a few weeks ago, about the implication of adding 80,000 people to Wellington. It's big dollars. And that will be considered as part of the spatial planning process, I'm sure. But it is big dollars. What I can say though is that it's easier for the wastewater system to deal with new people and apartment blocks than it is to deal with, if we replicated all the old houses, that would be a real challenge. So we plan on, three numbers around 270 litres per person per day of wastewater sewage. And we allow 4 times that, but that's because of that rainfall effect. So if we're only dealing with the people in an apartment block where they're not going to have gully traps with stormwater getting in, it's actually easier to deal with that intense growth, especially if they're localised. So it's not a straight multiplier. Follow me? So there was a fight tour process that you may have been involved in a couple of years ago on the Porirua side. There's a similar fight tour process going underway on, we're calling it the Porirua in the Hutt Valley in Wellington Harbour, and they much to be involved with that. That's setting some of the direction for reducing overflows. They're just going through the recommendations at the moment. For the
They kind of missed it. They missed us out. So they only go as far as power, really, with their consultation, because it's the way the media does. Our newspaper isn't a catchment newspaper. So the Independent Herald, which is who we did our news, goes from sort of Tawa south down to Porirua, down that way, whereas Kapimana News does Tawa north. So they get it's all the fuss and special treatment goes to Tawa, plus they've got the community board, so they get double the consultation and double the support, and all the councillors in the Northern Ward come from Tawa. So we've got a real problem up here with the Northern Ward's understanding of all of this, because we're just ignored. And we're the area with most of the development. I know you're getting new stuff going in down at Porirua, but up here's where it's all happening. And the majority of councillors don't live, in fact, we've got no councillors living in our Northern Ward, in this area, they're all in Tawa. So, and the rest are all living in town. So yeah, I think there's a real gap there that needs to be fixed. And I think possibly Greater Wellington Regional Council, because they own the Whatuira process, don't they? They own that. I think we need to hear more from those councillors, and we need to see them more, and they need to be more engaged in the northern suburbs. That's why I think a lot of the troubles in the northern suburbs are happening. The regional council's not, the media doesn't help us, and the regional council and our city council is not really connected in the big picture stuff that people are worried about up here. And water and erosion and sewage is all part of that.
Okay. Yeah, because that Porirua Whatuira finished a year or two ago. Those were the guys. So I put those ones up. The Wellington Whatuira is been underway for a year or two. So
I agree with Claire. I mean, one of the reasons the JCA is holding these meetings is because there is a communication gap. And so we're trying to fill, and like you're here, so you're doing the bits. It's good. That's why. So but part of the thing of you coming here is also take a message back to your stakeholders, and just when you're doing a communications plan or a consultation plan, you may need to know, you've got to make extra effort to cover us here. You can't just assume that an ad and keeping, or a spread and keeping on a news will
Yeah,
cover
if you
your
put it in
area.
Mana, we're not gonna see it.
Yeah.
And our Johnsonville journalist lives in the South Island. So, you know, it's a real challenge, and a Dominion Post is not really interested anymore. Journalism's hard, as they're saying. I think government's trying to get these issues, they'll put a lot of money into journalism and for people to apply for funding to increase the voice of Maori people and Pacific people. But there's a real problem, and voting new councils isn't going to solve it. It's a systemic problem. It's a system problem.
So you as an important service provider and influencer, I mean, it's important. I mean, and that's why, when you offer to come here and talk, we let you a chance, because of course, that's all part of the mix of making a good community with good amenities, making sure that we understand what you're doing and you can have an idea of how to get engaged with us.
Thanks, that's great. This is the detailed map for those who want to see which side of the wastewater system they contribute to.
Okay.
Everybody wants to know where their house sits.
So if you think about water, where water falls, is it going to go towards Porirua, is it going to go towards the gorge?
So that's schools. So there's the round.
Roundabout Sunday Finger.
Yeah. Roundabout's here, that's the big roundabout.
Yep.
It's Johnsonville Main School. And so you're going up toward, that's along the ridge line, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it's where the water.
Yeah.
So Clifford Road is round about the boundary.
Clifford Road, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, round about Clifford Road up there.
So it doesn't matter on your rates, it's sort of, well, so it just takes the rates regardless of which side of the boundary. And they contribute to the Porirua for
It's the
the
decision.
three big pump stations.
Yeah, I agree. It's not a rating issue. It's a decision-making issue, and it's a visibility issue. And the councils try hard. They really do. Our city councils try really hard to get around all the groups and heroes. But it's that integrated view with Ngāti Toa, Greater Wellington Regional Council, Porirua, and it's the same with the transport. It's just the system's broken. And I can't figure it. It's too big for me to try and give advice on how they can fix it. But
There's a big question. That was in my slide. So I was going to say there's an interesting change, of course, being proposed with water management that's going to go from councils to a regional entity all the way from Gisborne to Nelson.
but that's interesting again.
How we interact with the local community.
Yeah, well, that's the iwi boundaries. That's going on iwi boundaries.
Yep.
And you're still going to have decision-making problem because it's not necessarily catchment orientated. And this is around catchment, isn't it? Because it's where the water flows, it all goes down the stream. It's all going to a harbour everywhere.
Which is how regional councils are generally bounded.
So 33% of the catchment of the Porirua Harbour is up here.
It's
I think
it's
about
a council
33.
boundary, that's it.
Yeah, which is huge, but I would say we don't get 30% of the decision-making consultation going on here.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we need to think how we structure our governance better. Yeah.
So you've covered what you want to do. So one of the things I wanted to finish with is a question. So you mentioned that there's a resource consent. The key thing is that this is all happening planned. There's a resource consent and there's submissions. And so people can, if they want to do a submission or they want to have a say on the resource consent and support or otherwise, or even just to understand in more detail, where would they go?
They go to the Greater Wellington Regional Council website and they've got a section of applications and we've got signposts around where we can. But it's quite difficult for a big way catchment. So it's probably a real treatment part one. You go to Greater Wellington Regional Council.
It's the have you say dot. So if you look at, if you Google that, you'll get there. One thing I would say is the current consultation is on the treatment plant consent specifically. And so we'll be lodging probably early next year the network overview overflow consent, and at that point, there'd be the opportunity for people to comment on the network, where the discharge issue. So it is, the way that RMA works, it does separate things out a little bit, so we aren't able to apply for a sort of a single wastewater consent for the entire system. So there is certainly been some frustration in some meetings with people wanting to talk about, different things, and we're saying, well, we're actually here to talk about a consent. It's only dealing with the discharge out of the treatment plant. So it's just something to bear in mind. We do expect we'll get a number of submissions that are addressing issues that the hearing commissioners won't be able to answer or respond to because they're outside of the scope of the current.
Will you capture those to input into the next year's one on
We're expecting, well, the submissions shut this time next week. The first thing we'll be doing is summarising all the points raised and having a look at what we need to respond to immediately, and then we'll be able to take on board those other points that are relevant to the upcoming consent.
So you're not city council, you're not regional council, you're independent. Is that the structure?
So Wellington Water is owned by 6 city councils. So Porirua, Wellington, Upper Hutt, South Wairarapa, and then the regional council for the bulk water supply, drinking water supply is a regional scheme. So Wellington Water has to recommend budgets to the city council, and then the city council has the final call on how much they put into each bid, if you want to use that term. The rating people will be asking for a whole lot, the water people will be asking for a whole lot, and so on. So they're just been through that process, which has been a hefty increase by any standard. To address some of the infrastructure issues and other issues around Wellington.
I'm not going to ask you about the stories about how long you've been asking for proper funding. Obviously been around for a while, and finally got some attention by having some brown fountains turn up outside the mayor's office, almost. So I mean, anything to get attention. At least now you're getting that attention, and but that's also one of the reasons why our rate's going up quite a bit, isn't it? It's because you've got a whole backlog of work. So has anyone got any other questions?
Well, I've just got a general question. What do you think about the government's idea about having 4 water companies?
I mean, there's going to be pros and cons. You do get some efficiency, but then you've got the challenge of being more remote from the communities. I think that's going to be a big tension to work through.
Yeah.
It's sort of the way that most of the world operates, most of the Western world. They have places like England and Scotland. The whole of England has 7 water authorities. The whole of Scotland has 1. We've got 67. So it feels logical to me from a professional perspective.
And so then you can have things like common standards and bulk purchase of equipment and
Chances are it'll be, I mean, does it really matter to you whether you're working for this great big company up there or working for Wellington Water? Because the most important people in any organisation are the people at the bottom end who actually do the work, not the twits up the top.
I worked for a consultancy for about 19 years. I've worked on plants around the treatment plants around the North Island. Potentially it's going back to my old job, but it doesn't make any difference. It's still the same work to do. It's how it gets delivered and arranged, which will change.
For community engagement, would you consider going to local markets such as our own Johnsonville market?
Probably not. I mean, it's community engagements. You've got my engagement person back. I'm just an engineer. But it's often quite hard to get a decent audience, hard to get the right people involved. You often get people who are retired engineers or environmental activists, to be honest. And so these community boards are quite a good balanced.
And just picking up on that, does depend on the project, and with these sorts of things that affect the whole region, it's really hard to resource going to every community market and those sorts of things. But if it's an individual reservoir project or pipeline upgrade in a particular community, yeah, we absolutely do look at going to community markets or whatever, because it's also important to go where people naturally congregate as opposed to trying to draw an audience. So,
And if you want to, you can be the councillor records. The last councillor who attended the market was former councillor Pete Gilbert. So if that might give you a bit of a sign on things there. And as a stallholder, I do see who attends.
so Peter Gilbert didn't get re-elected, did he? So
No, but I'm saying that's the last councillor to attend.
But probably from a bang for buck perspective, right here, we've got 4 different northern areas residents associations. So we can all take that information back to our membership and keep spreading it. And we've got our wonderful YouTube viewers, kia ora, and that keeps compounding as well. So we really appreciate the time you've taken tonight. The outreach is fantastic. So thank you.
I would actually like to see these then. I'll blame Tony and Darren for this, because I think that this is of a lot of interest to our residents association. We're in the Oslo area, so that covers Kaiwara, Broadmeadows and Kandala. But I only just found out about this about just after lunchtime today. So I sent a message out to the committee, but of course, we'd like to send a message out to all our members. I mean, we've got 200 of them. So if we know about this, then we can...
So you're criticising us, and I'll take the criticism at heart. It's partly my fault.
I think this is sort of getting ready for the next one.
Yeah.
We're really interested in the northern suburbs about your rainwater, stormwater discharging and all that stuff, because that's where our homeowners, we've just been through this terrible storm. It's the second time in 20 years the debris arrestor down at Richmond Hills burst open and sent all that debris down to Porirua, and we've got a developer here who's pretty much filled in every stream and culverted it over and earthworked it. We know the water's got to go somewhere. It's going to be a real problem in the northern suburbs because they're still doing 1970 style subdivisions.
Yeah, so anyway, I'd just like to finish there. So we're doing these monthly, and we were certainly given the spatial plan and the impact that's going to happen across suburbs, especially Johnsonville, Kandala, but also Newlands and out in Tara as well. But I'm aware that you've got budgets, and the budgets are in the hundreds of millions over the next 20 to 30 years. I'm also aware that Johnsonville, in particular, being from Johnsonville, is targeted for early development, if you like. So the stuff that's going to happen to us, I say that advisedly, early. We would really like you. So thank you very much for what you've outlined tonight. Really appreciate it.
Really
and I think we would like to have you come back. And I would propose 2 things. You could talk about 2 things maybe together. One is to come and talk about the stormwater stuff, because I think the stormwater is actually the weak spot around Johnsonville, Kandala. So the area, so we can do a bigger combined message and a bit more planning. We'll get some more people along. And also, I think I want to pick up on your comment about the simple things that property owners can do, because I think if we arrange things right, we could possibly give another boost to the message and bring along their brochures and maybe do something around much more about what a homeowner can do just to check that they're doing the right thing by the three waters. Just if you came along and did the 5 simple checks sort of thing, if you check these things, if you find this stuff, then do this. And I think that would also be another quite good topic around getting the amenity and things better in our community.
Most people do want to do it right.
They do, most people do, yeah, that's true. So on that note, I'd like to thank you, and I thank the audience for coming along and people on YouTube. And but thank you very much for a very informative talk. Nearly, I'm not sure if it's better or worse than the talk for the roading guy around gravel versus asphalt. But that was also really interesting too. It's a much more interesting topic than it seemed. Thanks very much, guys.